ever wondered what happens when someone tampers with the king's legacy? Did you know some Elvis remixes caused major uproar among fans and family alike? Number 1. A Little Less Conversation, XL Remix. Remember 2002? The world was still recovering from Y2K panic, and suddenly Elvis was back on the charts. How? Dutch DJ Junkie XL, Tom Holkenborg, took a relatively obscure Elvis track from 1968 and transformed it into something entirely new. The original, A Little Less Conversation, was a minor track from the film Live a Little, Love a Little. It had none of the fame of Suspicious Minds or Jailhouse Rock. That all changed when JXL got his hands on it. He added electronic beats, sped up the tempo, and created something that felt both nostalgic and completely modern. The controversy started immediately. Elvis purists were horrified. How dare someone take the king's voice and surround it with computer-generated sounds? The Presley estate, however, saw things differently. They officially sanctioned the remix, which appeared in a Nike World Cup commercial before being released as a single before. The gamble paid off spectacularly. The XL remix topped charts in over 20 countries. It became Elvis's 18th #1 hit in the UK, breaking the record he had shared with the Beatles. Suddenly, a whole new generation was discovering Elvis through club speakers rather than dusty pylon. But the success created deeper questions about artistic legacy. Some critics argued it cheapened Elvis's artistry, turning him into a novelty act. Others pointed out that Elvis himself was an innovator who combined different musical styles. Wouldn't he have appreciated pushing boundaries? The song's producer, in its original form, Billy Strange, had mixed feelings. He expressed pride that the song found new life, but admitted feeling strange, hearing the transformed version. The remix opened the floodgates for more electronic takes on Elvis classics, some authorized and many not. Perhaps most controversially, the remix's success led to the creation of an entire album called Elvis 30-Pound One Hits, which remastered his classic songs with slightly modernized production, subtly altering the sound of recordings that fans considered sacred. Some audiophiles claimed they could hear significant differences in the mixes that changed the fundamental character of the originals. XL himself seemed surprised by the controversy, stating in interviews that he approached the project with respect for the original material. The remix's massive success cemented Elvis's continued cultural relevance in the 21st century, but for many fans it represented a crossing of an uncrossable line. Number 2. In the Ghetto, feat. Lisa Marie Presley. Can you imagine duetting with your dead father? In 2007, Lisa Marie Presley did just that, creating one of the most emotionally complex Elvis remixes ever released. The original, In the Ghetto, was already one of Elvis's most socially conscious songs when it was released in 1969. Written by Mac Davis, it told the story of a child born into poverty and his inevitable drift into crime and violence. When Lisa Marie decided to record a duet version with her father, she was entering emotionally charged territory. Through digital technology, producers were able to isolate Elvis's vocals from the original recording and combine them with Lisa Marie's newly recorded voice. The result was haunting, a father and daughter singing together across time with Elvis, having died when Lisa Marie was only 9 years old, The controversy surrounding this remix was multifaceted. Some fans felt it was a beautiful tribute, while others found it exploitative or even macabre. Music critics questioned whether Elvis would have approved of his voice being manipulated this way. The fact that Lisa Marie released the duet to mark the 30th anniversary of her father's death added another layer of emotional complexity. Priscilla Presley, Elvis's ex-wife and Lisa Marie's mother, publicly supported the project, saying it allowed Lisa Marie to connect with her father in a way she never could in life. But industry insiders whispered about the commercial aspects of the release. Was this a genuine artistic expression or a calculated move to capitalize on Elvis's enduring fame? The technical aspects of the remix also sparked debate. The production team had to make significant adjustments to match Lisa Marie's voice with Elvis's original performance. Some purists argued these alterations compromised the integrity of Elvis's original recording. The video that accompanied the song showed Lisa Marie and Elvis seemingly performing together, using historical footage of Elvis combined with new shots of Lisa Marie. This visual manipulation further divided opinions, with some finding it touching and others describing it as digital grave robbing. Lisa Marie discussed her complicated feelings about the project in interviews, acknowledging that she expected some backlash but felt compelled to create this connection with her father. She donated proceeds from the song to build transitional housing for homeless families in Memphis, addressing the very social issues that the original song highlighted. The remix ultimately became less about musical innovation and more about the complex intersection of grief, celebrity, and technological possibility. It raised difficult questions. If technology allows us to resurrect the voices of the dead, should we? And who gets to decide? Number 3. Rubberneckin'. Paul Oakenfold Remix. What happens when a psychedelic trance DJ gets his hands on a rockabilly Elvis track? In 2003, fans found out when Paul Oakenfold remixed Rubberneckins, and the results left Elvis's fan base deeply divided. The original Rubberneckin' was recorded for Elvis's 1969 film Change of Habit and had a playful, upbeat energy typical of his movie songs. When internationally renowned DJ Paul Oakenfold remixed it in 2003, he maintained that playfulness, but transplanted it into the world of electronic dance music, complete with thumping beats and synthesized effects. Following the massive success of JXL's A Little Less Conversation remix, Elvis Presley Enterprises was eager to continue connecting Elvis to younger audiences. They approached Oakenfold specifically because of his reputation in the club scene. The resulting remix preserved Elvis's vocals, but reimagined everything else about the song. The controversy began before the song was even released. News of another electronic remix led traditional fans to organize protests online, claiming that Elvis's rock and roll legacy was being systematically dismantled by these modern interpretations. Some longtime fan club members threatened to burn their memorabilia in protest. When the remix was released, accompanied by a music video featuring model Krista Allen dancing provocatively as Elvis watched from vintage film clips, the outrage intensified. Conservative fans objected to the sexualized imagery, arguing it had nothing to do with Elvis's original artistic vision. Religious groups who had embraced Elvis's gospel recordings were particularly vocal in their disapproval. Music critics were divided. Some praised Oakenfold for finding a way to make Elvis sound contemporary without losing the essence of his charisma. Others described it as a soulless commercial exercise that reduced Elvis to a novelty. The remix reached number 5 on the US Dance Club Songs chart, but failed to match the crossover success of A Little Less Conversation. Adding fuel to the controversy, several DJs claimed Oakenfold's remix was too safe, and that he hadn't taken enough risks with the material. These criticisms suggested that the remix was caught in an impossible middle ground, too radical for traditionalists, but not radical enough for club music aficionados. Oakenfold defended his work in interviews, explaining that he approached the project with respect for Elvis's musical legacy. He pointed out that Elvis himself was controversial in his time, shocking older generations with his provocative performances. Wasn't this remix simply continuing Elvis's tradition of pushing boundaries? The public response revealed deep divisions in how people viewed Elvis's legacy. Was he a sacred icon whose work should be preserved unchanged? Or was he an artist whose music could continue to evolve and find new audiences decades after his death? Number 4. Blue Suede Shoes, the Black Keys Remix. Can blues rock revivalists reinterpret an Elvis classic without causing controversy? When the Black Keys reworked Blue Suede Shoes in 2011, they learned the answer was definitively no. Unlike the electronic remixes that preceded it, the Black Keys version of Blue Suede Shoes was unusual because it attempted to take Elvis back to his raw roots. The duo, known for their stripped-down blues rock sound, removed the polished production of Elvis's version and reimagined it with fuzzy guitars and primitive drumming, ironically making it sound more like the Carl Perkins original that Elvis had covered. The remix was created for an Elvis-themed charity compilation benefiting music heirs. The Black Keys maintained they were paying homage to both Elvis and the early rock and roll sound that influenced their own music. They didn't use any digital manipulation of Elvis's voice, instead recording an entirely new instrumental track and then laying Elvis's isolated vocal performance on top. The controversy that followed split along unusual lines. Some traditional Elvis fans, who had objected to the electronic dance remixes, actually appreciated the Black Keys' back-to-basics approach. Others were furious that anyone would alter what they considered a definitive rock and roll recording, arguing that Elvis's version of Blue Suede Shoes was already perfect. Music historians entered the debate, pointing out that Blue Suede Shoes wasn't even originally an Elvis song. He had covered Carl Perkins' 1955 recording. This raised interesting questions about authenticity and ownership in music. If Elvis could reinterpret someone else's song, why couldn't contemporary artists reinterpret Elvis? The timing of the remix added another dimension to the controversy. It coincided with growing cultural conversations about appropriation in music, specifically white artists adapting black musical forms. Both Elvis and the Black Keys had been subjects of such discussions. Some critics used the remix as an opportunity to revisit questions about Elvis's relationship to African American music, creating a meta-controversy around the remix itself. Technical aspects of the remix also drew criticism. The separation of Elvis's vocals from the original instrumentation wasn't perfect, resulting in some artifacts and quality issues. Audio purists considered this disrespectful to the technical achievements of Elvis's original producers and engineers. The Black Keys themselves seemed surprised by the controversy. In interviews, they emphasized their love for early rock and roll and explained that they approached the project as fans. Dan Auerbach, The band's vocalist and guitarist noted that their intention was to highlight Elvis's raw vocal performance by stripping away the more dated elements of the original production. This remix ultimately raised profound questions about musical legacy. Is there an obligation to preserve historic recordings in their original form? Or is reinterpretation part of keeping music alive across generations? Number 5. Suspicious Minds. Viva Elvis Cirque du Soleil Remix. How far can you stretch a classic before it breaks? In 2010, Elvis fans confronted this question when Cirque du Soleil's Viva Elvis show in Las Vegas featured dramatically reworked versions of Elvis classics, most controversially Suspicious Minds. Cirque du Soleil was known for its artistic reinterpretations, but even by their standards, the Suspicious Minds remix was bold. The original, considered by many to be one of Elvis's greatest recordings, was transformed with new orchestration, chopped-up vocals, and a driving rock arrangement that bore little resemblance to the 1969 classic produced by Chips Moman. The remix was part of a larger theatrical production that told Elvis's life story through acrobatic stunts and reimagined music. While the show received mixed reviews, the soundtrack album sparked immediate controversy when released separately from the show. Without the visual context of the circus performances, the radical rearrangement struck many listeners as jarring and unnecessary. Elvis Presley Enterprises had fully authorized the project, but that didn't shield it from criticism. Longtime fans described the remixes as butchery and sacrilege. More measured critics questioned why such drastic changes were needed, especially for songs that had stood the test of time in their original form. The controversy intensified when several session musicians who had worked with Elvis expressed their disappointment. They felt the remixes dishonored the careful studio craft that went into the original recordings. Particularly vocal was James Burton, Elvis's legendary guitarist, who described feeling physically sick when he first heard the reworked tracks. Defenders of the project argued that Viva Elvis was clearly presented as a theatrical interpretation, rather than an attempt to replace the originals. They pointed out that Elvis himself had been a consummate showman who understood the value of spectacle and reinvention. Cirque du Soleil's artistic director described the project as a conversation with Elvis rather than a simple remix. The commercial response was mixed. While the Las Vegas show initially drew crowds, it closed earlier than expected in 2012. The soundtrack album performed modestly, nothing like the success of the JXL remix years earlier. Some industry analysts suggested that the project had pushed reinterpretation beyond what even open-minded fans could accept. The Suspicious Minds remix particularly highlighted the tension between artistic reinterpretation and historical preservation. The original track, with its distinctive fade-out and fade-in bridge section, was itself the product of creative studio decisions. By removing these elements, critics argued that the remix erased not just the sound but the creative choices that made the original special. The controversy extended beyond Elvis fans when several music critics used the remixes to discuss broader questions about cultural legacy. Was there a point at which reinterpretation became distortion? Who should control how legendary artists are remembered? And was there a difference between creative homage and commercial exploitation? Number 6. If I Can Dream, Royal Philharmonic Orchestra version. Is it a remix if you add 2 rather than subtract from a classic. In 2015, this question dominated discussions when If I Can Dream, Elvis Presley with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra was released, featuring Elvis's vocals, accompanied by newly recorded orchestral arrangements. If I Can Dream was already one of Elvis's most emotionally powerful songs. Recorded in 1968, shortly after the assassinations of Martin Luther, King Jr., and Robert Kennedy, the original featured a passionate vocal performance from Elvis with understated backing from his band and a small orchestra. The 2015 version dramatically expanded the orchestration, surrounding Elvis's voice with sweeping strings and dramatic dynamics from the prestigious Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. The album project had the full support of Priscilla Presley, who promoted it as a fulfillment of Elvis's unrealized ambition to perform with a full orchestra. She explained in interviews that Elvis had always loved orchestral music and had wanted to record with more classical elements. This claim added a layer of complexity to the controversy. Was this actually honoring Elvis's wishes rather than distorting his legacy? Critics of the project were vocal. They pointed out that Elvis had recorded with orchestral elements when he wanted them, and had specifically chosen the arrangements on his original recordings. Some complained that the new orchestrations overwhelmed Elvis's voice rather than complementing it. Purists argued that if Elvis had wanted more orchestration on these recordings, he would have included it during his lifetime. Technical aspects of the project also came under scrutiny. The process involved isolating Elvis's vocals from the original recordings, not always perfectly, and building entirely new arrangements around them. While the quality was generally high, audio experts could detect artifacts and separation issues that weren't present in the originals. The commercial response complicated matters further. The album was a surprise hit, reaching #1 in the UK and selling over 1.5 million copies worldwide. This success suggested that many fans embraced the new interpretations, even as vocal critics condemned them. The album's success led to a follow-up, The Wonder of You, using the same approach with different songs. Music critics were divided in their assessments. Some praised the project for finding a way to present Elvis's music to classical audiences and creating something genuinely new rather than simply repackaging old recordings. Others described it as a cynical commercial exercise that diminished the raw power of Elvis's original performances by smothering them in orchestral excess. The controversy reflected deeper questions about posthumous artistic control. If an artist cannot consent to changes in their work, who should make those decisions? Does commercial success justify creative reinterpretation? The Royal Philharmonic project forced Elvis fans to confront these questions directly. Interestingly, the project also revealed generational divisions within Elvis's fan base. Younger fans who had grown up with various Elvis remixes and reinterpretations were generally more receptive to the orchestral versions. Older fans, who remembered when the originals were first released, tended to be more resistant to any changes, regardless of how tastefully they were executed. Number 7. Don't Be Cruel. Authorize mashups. What happens when Elvis meets hip-hop without permission? In the early 2000s, a wave of unauthorized Elvis mashups and remixes circulated online, with Don't Be Cruel becoming a particular target for digital manipulation. Unlike the officially sanctioned remixes, these underground productions operated in a legal gray area. And producers would isolate Elvis's vocals from Don't Be Cruel and combine them with everything from Dr. Dre beats to samples from contemporary pop songs. The results varied widely in quality and taste, from clever recontextualizations to crude juxtapositions that seemed designed primarily to shock. The controversy surrounding these unauthorized remixes was multi-layered. Elvis Presley Enterprises actively tried to suppress many of them through copyright claims, arguing that they damaged Elvis's legacy and diverted revenue from official releases. This created a cat-and-mouse game between creators and copyright holders, with remixes disappearing from one platform only to reappear on another. Some of the most controversial mashups combined Elvis with artists whose music or image seemed deliberately contrary to his own. When Elvis's vocals from "Don't Be Cruel" were laid over instrumental tracks from artists known for explicit content, traditionalist fans considered it disrespectful to Elvis's memory. The unauthorized nature of these remixes sparked debates about fair use and artistic freedom. Defenders argued that mashup culture represented legitimate artistic expression and cultural commentary. Critics countered that Elvis's voice was being exploited without permission or quality control. The controversy intensified when several mainstream hip-hop artists expressed interest in working with Elvis samples, but were denied permission by his estate. This led to accusations that Elvis Presley Enterprises was selectively controlling Elvis's legacy based on cultural biases rather than artistic merit. Why was a Dutch DJ allowed to remix Elvis, but not prominent black hip-hop producers? Some of these unauthorized remixes gained significant underground followings. A particular mashup combining "Don't Be Cruel" with Missy Elliott's "Work It" became a club favorite in certain cities, despite never being commercially released. This created an alternate universe of Elvis reinterpretations existing outside official channels. Audio quality became another point of contention. Because these unofficial remixers didn't have access to isolated vocal tracks, they used various techniques to separate Elvis's voice from the original recordings. The results were often technically inferior to official remixes, with audible artifacts and background noise. Some fans considered this amateurish treatment disrespectful to Elvis's musical legacy. The controversy surrounding these unauthorized remixes reflected broader cultural tensions about ownership of art in the digital age. If Elvis's music was a fundamental part of American cultural heritage, did his estate have the right to completely control how it was reinterpreted? On the other hand, did respect for the artist and his intentions demand that his work be protected from unauthorized manipulation? Are some legacies too important to experiment with, or is reinterpretation the sincerest form of keeping an artist's work alive? What would the king himself say if he could hear how his voice continues to be reimagined decades after his death?